Human beings are wired for self-interest. You can build a government that tries to force selfless behavior through legislation, but history proves the outcome of that experiment is always the same: poverty, stagnation, and systemic collapse. When you attempt to cap human ambition, you are merely building a pressure cooker. Eventually, the steam of human nature will find a way out, or the entire machine will explode. We have spent centuries trying to ignore the friction of the individual ego, rather than figuring out how to grease the gears and make it work for us. In 1776, a Scottish professor named Adam Smith published the structural logic for turning that raw, unedited greed into a functional society. The Wealth of Nations was not written as a set of polite suggestions for the classroom. It was a technical blueprint for the modern world. Smith didn't want to change who we are. He wanted to harness what we are. He looked at the chaos of the marketplace and saw an unbending framework that could alchemize individual desire into collective prosperity. Before Smith, kings defined wealth as a static pile of hoarded gold. They believed that if one nation had a coin, another nation necessarily had one less. But a man sitting on a mountain of gold in a desert will still starve to death. The gold is not the wealth. Real wealth is a dynamic, moving system. It is the flow of goods and the annual produce of land and labor. It is a living engine powered by the baseline realities of human psychology. To grow a nation, you don't collect more shiny metal. You increase the speed and efficiency of the machine itself. To master this economic engine, you do not need to rewrite the laws of the universe. You only need to understand 4 specific requirements for national success. These are the mechanics of commerce that dictate why some societies thrive, while others crumble under the weight of their own inefficiency. Lesson 1: the division of labor. All economic surplus originates from breaking complex work down into its smallest possible pieces. In a primitive state, every person is a generalist. They build their own shelter, hunt their own food, and weave their own clothes. Because they are doing everything, they excel at nothing. They spend their entire lives on the edge of survival because their labor is spread too thin to ever produce more than they consume. The human brain and body develop incredible dexterity when they focus on a single, isolated task. When you force a worker to constantly switch context, move between different workbenches, and pick up different tools, you bleed momentum. You lose time in the transition. Specialization allows a worker to reach a level of speed and precision that is physically impossible for a generalist to match. The more you divide the work, the more the output multiplies. Smith illustrated this using the manufacturing of a simple pin. If a single untrained worker tried to forge the wire, cut it to length, and shape the head by himself, he might struggle to produce one single pin in an entire day. He certainly could not make 20. This historical woodcut shows the specialized workspace required for this process. One person acting alone faces a bottleneck of physics. They are limited by the speed of their own hands moving from one tool to the next. Now, divide that exact same process into 18 distinct operations. One man draws out the wire, another straightens it, a third cuts it, a fourth points it, a fifth grinds it at the top for receiving the head. By distributing those specific steps among just 10 specialized men, the output doesn't just double, it explodes. Those 10 men can produce 48,000 pins in a single day. That is nearly 5,000 pins per person. They achieve this production multiplier without adding more hours to the workday. They are simply using the same human energy more intelligently. The lesson: wealth begins with the systematic division and specialization of labor. Lesson 2: the true measure of price. We often treat the physical currency in our pockets as if it has intrinsic value, but a coin is just a placeholder. To understand how the world actually works, you have to look past the money and see the labor. Every commodity has a real price and a nominal price. The nominal price is the amount of silver or gold you pay for it. The real price is the amount of toil and trouble it costs to produce. Humans value commodities based solely on the amount of physical effort the item saves us from enduring ourselves. When you purchase a loaf of bread, you aren't just buying flour and water. You are buying the hours a farmer spent tilling the soil, the work of the miller grinding the grain, and the heat the baker endured at the oven. You are paying them to experience that toil so that you don't have to. The value is not in the bread, it is in the time you have saved. For centuries, empires hoarded these British sovereign coins, believing the metal itself was the source of power. They thought that by locking gold in a vault, they were making the nation stronger. But gold produces nothing on its own. It doesn't grow crops or build houses. It is a sterile asset. The coins are only useful because of what they can be traded for. Possession of wealth is actually the command over other people's labor. If you have 10 gold coins, you have the power to purchase 10 days of a carpenter's life or 10 weeks of a weaver's time. The money is simply a voucher for human energy. A wealthy nation is not one with a full treasury of gold, but one where every citizen has a high command over the labor of others, because their own labor is highly productive. The lesson: money is a shadow, and the true price of everything is the human life and labor required to acquire it. Lesson 3: the accumulation of capital. The growth of any society is defined by the constant friction between delayed gratification and immediate indulgence. Adam Smith called this parsimony versus prodigality. You can either spend your surplus today on a better dinner, or you can save it and use it to employ a worker who will create even more value tomorrow. There is a vital difference between productive labor and unproductive labor. A worker who builds a plow is productive because that plow will help grow more food for years to come. The value of his work is realized in a physical object that generates future revenue. A menial servant who shines a nobleman's shoes is unproductive. The moment the shoes are polished, the value of that labor vanishes. It leaves nothing behind. A nation that employs too many servants and not enough toolmakers is a nation that is eating its own future. Look at the difference in how these resources are deployed. On the left, a farmer takes his surplus and buys a new machine. He is building fixed capital. This allows his land to produce more with less effort, creating a bigger surplus for the next season. On the right, an aristocrat spends his wealth on luxury imports and a staff of 50 idle servants. He is not building anything, he is merely consuming. The resources are being sucked into a void. One path leads to compound growth. The other leads to the slow evaporation of the nation's capital. The lesson: a society only grows richer when it saves its surplus to employ productive hands, rather than squandering it. Lesson 4: the invisible hand and free trade. The most efficient way to organize an economy is to leave it alone. The concept of mercantilism, where a government tries to pick winners and losers or block foreign goods, is a mistake of logic. A state cannot dictate prosperity from the top down. It can only provide the environment where prosperity happens on its own. When individuals are free to seek the most profitable employment for their own capital, they don't need a king to tell them what to do. They are guided by their own self-interest to find the gaps in the market. By trying to make the most money for themselves, they are forced to provide the best possible service to others. They are led as if by an invisible hand to promote the public interest, even though it was no part of their original intention. Millions of independent actors perfectly synchronize supply and demand without a single central planner giving a single order. Smith proved this by looking at wine production. Scotland could technically grow its own grapes using expensive, heated greenhouses. It is physically possible to make Scottish wine, but it would cost 30 times more to produce than simply buying wine from France. When a government uses a tariff to force its citizens to buy that expensive domestic wine, it is performing an act of economic self-harm. It is forcing the nation to use 30 units of labor to get what it could have gotten for one. This diverts capital away from industries where the country is actually efficient and wastes it on vanity projects. Protectionism doesn't save jobs, it destroys the total wealth of the nation. The lesson: government interference destroys wealth, while the unhindered pursuit of individual profit naturally engineers the maximum good. Smith replaced the hoard with a harvest. He showed us that wealth is not a locked vault of bullion. It is the total annual produce of the land and labor of the society. It is a dynamic, living machine, powered by the baseline realities of our own nature. He proved that a free market thrives entirely on rational self-interest. When we divide our labor, value our time correctly, and reinvest savings into productive tools, the engine of progress moves forward at an incredible speed. But what happens when the invisible hand is manipulated by those who have grown too large to fail? What happens when modern monopolies begin to hijack these psychological mechanisms, shoving an iron wedge into the teeth of the system to prevent competition? The machine begins to grind. To understand how financial crashes are engineered by those who claim to protect the market, we have to look at the advanced execution framework of market manipulation,